So here is today's content. We will introduce more in part 2. So we take this impact, including vulnerabilities, including threats, that is, this probability, are all analyzed clearly. Then for risks, we will get high, medium and low risks. So how to respond to risk? Here we talk about risk acceptance. There are 4 strategies for risk acceptance. This we need to know because from the perspective of risk management, for example, a major risk, that is, I calculated a certain business. For example, a new system is online. After I calculated it, I will find that the risk of this new system going online is extremely high. Let me give you an example. For example, I'm going to do an external media release the system now, but I found that this system is directly published on the internet and I'm a relatively eye-catching large company. There may be many people attacking me, or the cost of attacking me is extremely high. Then I don't need to be completely open. I will switch to a different way. For example, I only allow my suppliers to dial into my intranet via VPN. Then I can let him access my certain business system. Then I gave up the original business. So generally speaking, the major risk is when my risk return or my business return is far less than my risk loss value. Then the risk is too high. Then I won't go online with this business system. This is the first one. What is the second one? It's called risk mitigation. So what is risk mitigation? For example, let's take the example just now. I'm going to launch a business system now. I found that the risk of my external server is very high. But what can I do? I can buy a firewall first. Please note that buying a firewall, this is risk mitigation, because through the deployment of the firewall, I will filter out a large number of relatively low-end hackers. This means that I have greatly reduced the probability of risk occurrence. At the same time, I will make a backup for my business system. In case, even if those high-level hackers break my system, but I have a backup, I can restore the business. Obviously, the firewall belongs to reducing the probability because I filtered out most of the hackers, and the backup, it didn't filter out hackers. Because you just said I backed up the data, but it reduces the loss. Because the amount of data you lost is reduced, I can at least restore most of it. For example, more than 90% of the data I can restore. So the so-called risk mitigation, risk reduction, we can understand it as through investing in equipment or building new technology. I either reduce the loss of risk, otherwise reduce the risk of loss, or reduce the probability of risk occurrence. This is risk mitigation. This is the second type. So what is the third type? Sometimes I don't have this technical capability. For example, my control or grasp of safety. I don't have this technical capability. In this case, I can transfer the risk to what? Transfer the responsibility of this risk to a third party, outsource it to suppliers through contracts, or transfer the risk to insurance companies through contracts, let them compensate. But there is something to note here. Can risk be transferred? Only the losses we talk about can be transferred, but the ultimate responsibility cannot be transferred. Because the ultimate responsibility, pay attention, the ultimate responsibility, for example, legal responsibility, or the financial responsibility of the organization, this ultimate responsibility, it's meaningless to find suppliers because it's not their business. Then we say there is a contract. They only compensate us financially, like moral and legal. Like this business responsibility, you can't transfer it. What about the fourth part? It's accepting the risk. What is risk acceptance? If it's a small risk in itself, or we say we target, for example, medium to high risk, we have done considerable risk. We reduce it to a part, then the remaining residual risk may become very small. What is a small risk? Acceptable, I think some losses can be ignored. Then this is risk acceptance. So to this point, it is according to the risk. For example, the size or the properties of the risk. We choose the corresponding risk response method and strategy. This is risk response. But risk response? Actually, it's a risk response plan. Why do you say that? Maybe that risk hasn't happened yet. I already have a risk contingency plan. Only when the risk occurs, I will respond. So, risk response. It doesn't necessarily mean I have to execute that risk plan now. Not necessarily. The risk response plan is not necessarily, once the risk occurs. What to do? Pay attention. Here involves something called risk assignment. What is risk assignment? A business system or our information system generally. Because for example, like an intelligent manager, he is very busy, although he is the business system, but he generally doesn't do specific risk management work. He generally outsources this work to, for example, our security personnel. It could be assigned to our security department. And another part, it might be to find a security officer from his business department. Generally large foreign companies, each department will have its own security. This security officer, he may not understand technology, but he always pays attention to risk. For example, the risk of enterprise operation, including the risk of a certain core business. When he thinks that the risk conditions may be met, for example, like some visits are too large or the weather is too hot, it may trigger the risk of fire. He thinks that the conditions for that risk may be met, then he will raise this risk level, or he will always be in a relatively cautious state. That's the security personnel, generally speaking, security personnel. We can choose internal security personnel in the department, or in the entire organization, it's the security department. He takes on the work of this security personnel. It's very clear, once the risk comes or the risk conditions have changed, he will report. He has a duty to report. This is what we call risk assignment, because our specific business department is very busy. The risk may not have occurred yet, but someone has to manage it. This is risk assignment. Speaking to this point, you can feel the whole risk management. For example, like COSO, from internal environmental control, to risk assessment, risk response, control activities, continuous monitoring. Almost all risk management frameworks can revolve around the process we just talked about, or he will make some adjustments in some details. But the general process is similar, so you need to understand the whole risk management process, from identifying risks to qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. Especially our quantitative analysis part also has a calculation body. Find the risk response strategy, then continuously maintain risk management. The whole process, the risk response. When we find risk response measures, that is, when we respond, we may purchase some equipment, or purchase some tools, or even possibly recruit some security personnel. But whether it's equipment and tools, pay attention to this place. You have to do cost effectiveness. Just as we said, the cost of your equipment and tools, it has to be less than what? It has to be less than the expected loss of risk. If my investment in technology, the cost of the equipment and tools I bought is greater than the risk loss, then I don't need to. I spent 100,000 yuan to buy a backup system, and it also includes backup software. Then I come to protect an asset value of 50,000 yuan, a supermarket or a convenience store's data. What's the point? Why not just run 2 supermarkets? Aren't 2 supermarkets just 100,000 yuan? Why should I buy this equipment to protect an asset that is not worth it? So this is what everyone needs to do. It's a process of calculating. We need to evaluate whether it is reasonable to do so. So what are all these things we just talked about? Safety architecture is something to consider. What is the business we need to handle? Everyone pay attention. There's another important thing here. Sometimes one comes from the characteristics of our business, and another comes from the related parties. So as a security architect, you have to consider one is business requirements, one is the related parties, for example, user, owner, including this operation, this admin. All parties have considerable work responsibilities in the system and also considerable interests. You have to balance. Well, why? Because sometimes you will find that My business needs to have a lot of these security factors or requirements, but the related parties may not be satisfied. For example, if you of course we say the longer the password, the safer. But if you set a 20-digit password, then it is very likely that for the user, the related party, he can't remember a 20-digit password. What will this lead to? I directly write the 20-digit password. I write it in front of this monitor. Everyone pay attention. Then you might as well just require an 8-digit password. He can remember it. You say a 20-digit password. He posted a note or that sticky note. Then basically everyone knows this password. So you always have to balance the requirements of the related parties for business convenience and my risk or security needs. This also needs to be considered. Not just calculating, you have to consider the security requirements of the business. I also have to consider whether the end user, the user, finds it convenient to use. So the difficulty lies here. This is a security architect. Once the security architect has set the security framework or the security baseline, what the security practitioner needs to consider. What kind of tools do I need to use? How long do I need? For example, RTO, RPO, to get it done. So what is he specifically implementing? What else? I also have to audit and monitor. This is his part. There is a special group of people in the security department called security experts, the so-called security experts. You can understand them as the high level of security. For example, CSO, the CSO, he is the one who sets the standards. How do I judge whether I am safe? How do I judge whether I meet the requirements of CIA? And how do I judge whether I meet the company's security policy? This is a security expert. So the security expert is one who sets the standards. Another responsibility of the security expert, he himself also has a so-called awareness as a security expert. I have to convey my understanding of security or the company's security awareness. I have to communicate it to my grassroots because the logic is very simple. Whether it's my middle level or the high level takes security very seriously. But my grassroots are completely indifferent or they are not sensitive at all. They do not maintain the necessary caution. Then I can't build this security system. It's like the high level is very anxious, but the people below, they don't know how to act. In this case, it becomes empty talk. It's meaningless. So the security expert is one who sets the standards, also needs to security awareness, also needs to cultivate the grassroots or this user security awareness. So these are his two functions. At this point, everyone will have a question. Why is the security department so complicated? There are security professors, there are security practitioners, there are security experts. Let's take a look at these security roles. This is often tested in the exam. That is, it involves the entire security work. There are a series of roles. The relationship and difference between these roles is the focus of our exam sometimes. This double SP exam taker, where is it? He will be in different roles. To look at what we need to do for security work. It might be different. Let's give an example. You can look at the next page. For example, senior management. We understand it as CEO. What is the main responsibility of the CEO? First, he has to formulate strategies, set the tone for security strategy. Second, he has to release the strategy. Why? He is the ultimate responsibility because you ultimately bear the legal. This legal responsibility or the social responsibility. The ultimate is the CEO. So what else does he have to do? He has another responsibility called listening to reports. These are all active responsibilities, but there is a passive responsibility here because you have to understand the implementation situation of the grassroots. So in the end, we summarize that the CEO has three responsibilities. The first is the ultimate responsibility. The second is what? Formulating strategy. The work of formulating security strategy is done by him. The third is listening to reports. Just now we talked about security experts. We can understand it as CSO. What is CSO? He is the one who implements the tasks assigned by the senior management. Obviously, the task issued by the senior management is what we say. He has to set standards. In addition, he has to provide training. He has to let his subordinates or the grassroots workers, what does he have to do? He has to have security awareness. So what is he in decision making? Implementer, we say it's the executor. This is the second step. The third part is called the data owner. We call it owner. The owner is the ownership of the data. So what are the responsibilities of the owner? First, he is grading and classifying. We mentioned earlier, you have a lot of business. Which business is important? Which business is not important? Only those familiar with the business or those who own the business. He knows the importance of his business. He is the one who classifies and categorizes. What else is there? Please note, we just mentioned the owner. What is he? He has 100% control over the information. For example, this information. When I say to use it, who to use it for? So he has an authorization. We also call it delegation. That is, he authorizes or delegates specific people to use that data and maintain that data. From the perspective of using data, we call it a user. He has to use the owner's data. What does the user need to do? First, you need to understand the company's security policy. You need to know why. Did the security expert just talk to this user? I need to train you. I do so through security awareness, education, and training. Because I am also engaged in security work, I also go to many places like Sinopec and Sinop, like Mobile, Unicom. We do this awareness education for these airlines every year. They receive this awareness education every year. It is the training of security awareness education. Tell these users, what is our company's security policy? What are the industry standards? Once there is a problem, what are the consequences and impacts? You mean, you need to scare them. You need to make them feel tense. From the user's perspective, you need to participate in learning. There is also a need to follow rules. You need to comply with the rules. You need to meet these requirements in the process of using data or in the process of handling business. You need to do it according to standards and requirements. This is the user. So the owner decides what data the user can see or what data can be processed. Another one is the admin. This admin is also interesting, whether we are talking about network admin or database. We are talking about DBA, database administrator. He is actually delegated by the owner to do what? Maintain data, or we can understand it as configuration, specific configuration, like backup, like configure. Like this, we talk about adjustment, create an account. These are generally done by the admin. Everyone needs to remember one point. The admin is not a security personnel. He might manage the firewall. He might also do virus killing, but he is not a security personnel. Security personnel actually do not operate. Security personnel. Please note this security. What is his main responsibility? One of his responsibilities is testing. Through testing, I judge whether your admin work is in place. What else? Audit. Testing and auditing are different. Testing is mainly for the new system itself, while auditing is to see if all your processes are compliant, whether everyone has done it and only done what they should do. He will produce a report. And this report, please note that he gave it to the senior management. Your senior management is waiting for the report. So I am a security personnel. So the auditor is what we call a security personnel. His main job is to test and audit, to produce a report to the senior management. Do we have any security issues, or whether our compliance meets the requirements? This is the concept. So everyone needs to understand the security administrator and the system administrator we talk about, or the database administrator. They are completely two different concepts. Their logical relationship is different because the database administrator or the network administrator is essentially one. We can understand it as an operator, that is a maintenance person or an executor. He is not a security person. So security is more about supervision, in control, in auditing. So everyone needs to understand their relationship. So when it comes to the security administrator, we just mentioned he is more of a reporter. Each department can set up its own security administrator. What is his main job? You see, his main job is supervision. And what is he responsible for? Responsible for auditing. That is to verify whether everyone is executing. So his concept and logic are different. So let's test everyone's awareness of security risks. We have a small case here. There are 3 scenarios in it. One is mobile application. What is a mobile application? That is what we call a mobile phone or a pad. Now work is done through mobile phones and pads because during the epidemic, it has become increasingly popular, including many state-owned enterprises I visited. They can also work online through VPN on their mobile phones. They can handle some official business at home or in a hotel, especially big political parties. So what are the risks of mobile office? Everyone can think about it. There are mainly 2. What is one of them? Because of fear of losing the mobile phone. So this mobile office, one is the risk of the device. He is afraid of losing it. Then this place, we have to do full disk encryption. Before CCTV made an advertisement called 8848 mobile phone. It mentioned that it is a mobile phone with a security chip. This is full disk encryption. Another mobile, this mobile Jing Jing, what is he afraid of? He is afraid of this authority, especially like Android phones. In the process of using it, permission management is very important. So in the future, we will talk about, it's called MDM. It's called the Mobile Device Management System. For example, like what is this security butler, security guard? Similar to this, is management of permissions. He must have. Now, basically all mobile phones have, for example, Samsung, including Huawei, they all have this security management center, or called intelligent authorization center. These modules, this is for mobile. This is the first one. The second one is for Web 2.0, that is what we call the BS architecture. Like now BS architecture is used more. Its main risk, 2 points. The first one is what we call its own code script. We often have what injections, XSS. In the future, we will talk about script attacks. Another one, the biggest problem with Web 2.0. Now there are a lot of, for example, browsers. I'll give you an example. Like Microsoft's, what we call this Edge browser. You can take a look. Please wait a moment. We find a browser. You will find like this kind of browser. We will find that it has a lot of this. The company has this network management. Let's take a look at this place first. It will have a lot of plugins. For example, like what Thunder, like AI, this ChatGPT. There will be a lot of plugins integrated into this browser. What do we call these plugins? It's called API. It's called the Application Programming Interface. In fact, API for Microsoft's browser, it also has one generally called ActiveX. That is what we say. This plugin, this browser plugin, just now you can see that I installed a lot of software. It also has a lot of plugins, like the Evernote plugin. There is also one I often go to Taobao to buy things. I installed that price comparison dog. That is, he can see JD.com, including Tmall, Taobao, their price comparison. And these plugins are likely to reveal our personal information or privacy. Because when we browse the web, your search history, including your username, passwords may be leaked by them. So this is quite rampant. This is for Web 2.0. In the future, we will talk about how to prevent these. So this is the risk for the BS architecture. Then the risk for cloud computing. Let's take a look. Now use cloud computing more. For example, network disk, cloud disk, including iCloud. This Apple Cloud. Even now cloud computing services, we will put the local server on the cloud, directly using cloud resources. So the risk of cloud computing, actually, it's essentially a tenant, right? It's just like whether we rent equipment or rent applications. Actually, it's a tenant. So for tenants, we need to consider, you can go to this place, you can understand, because we are tenants, so we can't see the underlying things. Actually, the first biggest risk is the owner's risk. What does it mean? That is, we have lost control of the data. Because once you upload the data to the cloud, although you think the data is still yours, but all control over the data. For example, we want to encrypt or we want to destroy the data is difficult because this involves the second risk. Where is this data? I don't know, because cloud computing itself uses grid computing, including shared computing, that is distributed computing. That is, it uses shared resources or timed resources. Where is the data on which servers, which hard disks, which partition? I don't know. Did the server maintainer make a backup privately? I don't know either. Or it is possible that this data has been scattered to many servers. Then different servers may have some part of your data. And has this part been leaked? I don't know either. So the biggest risk of cloud computing is the control of data. There is a problem. In the future, we will also talk about how to solve the risk of cloud computing. So you can feel that there are more new businesses now, and the way to access business is becoming more and more convenient. That is, it is becoming more and more convenient for our users or to track users. Then, on the contrary, the challenge or risk of security is getting higher and higher. So I've already talked about BCP from BIA called Business Impact Analysis. Then we do this risk analysis. You will find more and more risks, and the risk level is also getting higher. So for the security of information systems, we need to understand it. It is actually about the relationship of risks. We will end the discussion of this example here.